Hello everyone, welcome to the Cinema Analysis channel. I am Juzo. This channel will explore the hidden truths of films that are not usually revealed. Today I'd like to talk about Anatomy of a Fall. What is the truth behind the incident? What is the true meaning of the title? If you haven't seen the film, I suggest you watch it first. So let's get started. So did you see the film? It was critically acclaimed, but some viewers had complaints. That's because the film can be described as dyspeptic as a mystery. There appear to be two versions of the film's poster. The more well-known one shows a man lying in the snow, bleeding from his head, with his terrified wife and son nearby. Naturally, the audience expects the story to reveal the truth behind the incident. Judging by the trailer, it seems the wife, whose husband has died, is falsely accused. The viewer assumes the film will be about her proving her innocence. But that's not what this film is about. Since the mystery is never fully resolved, many viewers are left with a sense of dissatisfaction, as if their curiosity was never satisfied. There's an older film with a very similar title, Anatomy of a Murder, made in 1959. It's also a courtroom drama. The protagonist is a lawyer who enjoys playing the piano. It's possible this film has some influence on Anatomy of a Fall. Anatomy of a Fall has also been described as a Hitchcockian procedure thriller. But what does that mean? It probably includes the following elements. The protagonist is falsely accused or threatened with death. The protagonist is an ordinary person, not perfect, and with flaws or weaknesses that contribute to their situation. Psychological tension is emphasized over action. The inciting incident is often triggered by a MacGuffin, a seemingly important object or clue that is never fully explained or resolved. By these standards, Anatomy of a Fall can indeed be seen as a suspense story that includes Hitchcockian traits. The film draws the audience in from its unusual opening. Sandra, the protagonist, is being interviewed by a young woman. Even though it's still daytime, she is drinking wine. She tries to make small talk, seemingly unrelated to the interview. Perhaps just an icebreaker, but she also appears to be avoiding the real topic. Then Samuel, her husband, suddenly starts playing loud music. Sandra ends the interview with just asking him to stop. Already several odd or ambiguous moments begin to stack up. Their son Daniel is visually impaired. When he returns from a walk with his guide dog, he finds his father's body. Sandra is also shocked when she sees it. In front of the audience, who is confused by the pile of strange events, the body is shown. The same image from the poster appears. At this point, Sandra is no longer a character the audience can wholly sympathize with. She has already done things that don't quite align with what a normal person might do. The autopsy revealed that the cause of death was blow to the left side of the head. It could have been caused by the impact of the fall, or it could have been a deliberate strike. Sandra becomes a prime suspect. She is not someone easy to empathize with, but it still feels unlikely that she killed her husband. After all, she appeared shocked and confused when she called the police. Still, the police begin to suspect her. Sandra and her husband's relationship was far from ideal. The window he supposedly fell from was high. It seems unlikely that he simply fell. And the blood stains on the wall don't match a natural fall either. Given the title, Anatomy of a Fall, the audience expects a detailed breakdown of how he fell and why the blood splattered where it did. The trial begins, and one testimony after another casts suspicion on Sandra. The audience begins to wonder if she actually did have a motive. What many viewers likely expected was a story about an innocent protagonist proves her innocence. But instead, the story becomes a search for the truth, with Sandra herself now among the suspects. Maybe she's guilty, maybe not. As testimonies unfold, the audience's initial impressions of Sandra, her husband, and even their son Daniel begin to shift. Many viewers may be reminded of Akira Kurosawa's film Rashomon, where the same event is recounted from different perspectives, each revealing a different truth. Sandra, the protagonist, with whom the audience is expected to emphasize most, has some unconventional traits. She is bisexual. While her sexuality is not something she can choose or change, social conventions dictate that married individuals should not engage in sexual relationships outside the marriage. For many viewers, her apparent infidelity may be difficult to sympathize with. This sentiment likely reflects the majority's stance. At this point in the film, the purpose of the trial begins to shift, from determining whether Sandra committed the crime to exploring her motive. A criminal trial is supposed to establish whether or not the accused committed the act. The focus should be on proving whether Sandra could have committed the crime. However, in court, attention shifts to subjective matters like impression management and personal character. This may leave many viewers puzzled, but this is precisely where director and co-writer Justin Triet's message becomes clear. The film is a Hitchcockian thriller. The clue that involves the protagonist in the incident is a MacGuffin, just a clue. Even the message serves primarily as a means to expose deeper human truths. Triet has explored the dynamics of married life in her past works, and this film can be seen as a culmination of her thematic exploration. Notably, the camera never shows the moment of the husband's death. The court attempts to uncover the truth, but the film emphasizes that this is ultimately impossible. Vincent, Sandra's lawyer, even says, "A trial is not about the truth." Later, Merge Berger, the court monitor, tells Sandra's son, Daniel, "Since you can't believe in two things at the same time, you have to choose." The trial becomes an exercise in deciding what to believe, not in discovering an objective truth. What emerges is the inner turmoil each person carries. Daniel, nearly blind and the one who discovered the body, is portrayed as bearing psychological trauma. Likely shocked, his testimony wavers. He becomes obsessively devoted to practicing the piano, perhaps as a way to cope with his father's death or to escape its emotional weight. The piece he practices is Asturias by Isaac Albeniz. At one point, while he is playing, Sandra interrupts and begins to play another piece, Prelude No. 4 in E minor by Frédéric Chopin. This can be interpreted as a symbolic act, the mother stealing the son from the memory of his father. Vincent, the lawyer, is an old acquaintance of Sandra's, and he seems to harbor romantic feelings for her. He tells her that if they argue Sandra's death was an accident, no one will believe them. But does he truly believe that? If Samuel committed suicide, it might suggest he no longer loved Sandra, something Vincent perhaps wants to believe. It's possible his personal feelings influence his interpretation. The person most deeply troubled in the story, however, is Samuel, the deceased husband. He once dreamed of becoming a writer, but when his son lost his vision, Samuel believed it was his responsibility. He wondered how he could pursue his writing ambitions while also caring for his son. Running a mountain lodge seemed like a solution, giving him both time and space to write. So he moved to France, his homeland. But the home renovation failed to progress smoothly, and his writing didn't go well either. Gradually, his mental state deteriorated. Sandra's infidelity likely worsened this decline. Samuel even secretly recorded conversations with Sandra, one of which is played in court. In the recording, Sandra lashes out, "You complain about a life that you chose. You're incapable of facing your ambitions, and you resent me for it. Your pride makes your head explode before you can even come up with a gem, an embryo of an idea." This moment reveals the core of Samuel's emotional and psychological struggle. Vincent suggests that Samuel recorded the conversation hoping to use it as material for a novel, but that effort failed. He argues that what ultimately pushed Samuel over the edge was his frustration, not the confrontational dynamic in his marriage. These themes and portrayals are likely what Justin Trier most wanted to express. Enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-imposed immaturity. Immaturity is the inability to use one's understandings without guidance from another. This immaturity is self-imposed when its cause lies not in lack of understanding, but in lack of resolve and the courage to use it without guidance from another. This is a quote from the philosopher Immanuel Kant. Erich Fromm emphasized that freedom is accompanied by responsibility. Kant defines immaturity as the inability to use one's own understanding without relying on others. And this concept applies to Samuel. Samuel moved to France and tried to run a mountain lodge in order to focus on writing, a decision he made using his own understanding. However, according to Kant's definition, he remains immature. From the assertion that freedom entails responsibility further underscores this point. When you act freely, you must accept the consequences of your decisions. If things go badly, blaming others is not an option. That is why Kant insists that both decision and courage are necessary for genuine maturity. As Sandra points out during the confrontation, Samuel blames her for the consequences of his own choices. In this sense, he fails to take full responsibility for his life. What's unusual about Samuel's behavior is that he began secretly recording their arguments and after that actively provoked confrontation. One interpretation is that he intended to use these confrontations as material for a novel, suggesting a creative purpose, not a suicidal one. But there's another possibility. After recording a particular intense argument, Samuel takes his own life. The recording, likely to be discovered by police, portrays a hostile relationship. Given the absence of a suicide note and the fact that he fell from a location where accidental falls are unlikely, suspicion naturally falls on Sandra. It's conceivable that Samuel anticipated this, that his death would be seen as murder, with his wife as the primary suspect. In other words, he may have orchestrated his suicide to implicate her. In fact, Sandra was suspected. From the start, Sandra maintained that Samuel's death was an accident. but she likely considered the possibility of suicide. Still, acknowledging suicide would imply that she may have contributed to his despair. She's a successful writer. He struggled with his ambitions. In other words, he is nobody. Their frequent arguments were no secret. If the police questioned Daniel, he wouldn't lie. It was foreseeable that Sandra could be blamed. That's likely why she preferred to insist it was an accident. Anyone would in her situation. Sandra was nearly convicted, but it was Daniel, her son, who saved her. When the dog briefly fell unconscious, Daniel deduced that it had swallowed aspirin Samuel had spat out. If Samuel spat out the pills, it might mean he was attempting suicide. Earlier, Samuel told Daniel the dog will die someday. Daniel interpreted this as a veiled message, that his father would die soon and disappear from his life. The court accepted Daniel's interpretation and Sandra was acquitted. The prosecutor claimed that Daniel's memory was extremely subjective, but all testimony is subjective to some degree. So how do we determine what qualifies as too subjective? Daniel shared this interpretation at the end of the trial after hearing Murge say, "Since you can't believe in two things at the same time, you have to choose. Should Daniel believe that his mother killed his father, or should he believe that his father killed himself? Which belief would help him here? Which one would help him move forward?" Maybe Daniel made his decision based on what he needed for the rest of his life. The word "fall" in the title Anatomy of a Fall is most often interpreted as referring to the literal fall of Samuel's body from the window. But I believe there is a deeper meaning. Consider the biblical phrase, the fall of man, a moral or spiritual decline. The French word chute in the French title, which carries the same dual meaning. In this film, Paul may also suggest ethical failure, depravity in a sense. The film does not reveal the objective truth of Samuel's death. That's left to the audience to interpret. And life itself works the same way. Maybe your life right now feels disappointing. Do you decide it's a failure? Or do you see it as a part of your growth? That choice is yours. The recording revealed that Samuel believes external circumstances were the reason for his unhappiness. But even if he had lived, could he have been content? He secretly recorded his wife and provoked conflict. Whether for a novel or not, it led to family pain. Could a person who acts like that truly find happiness? Ultimately, interpretation depends on each viewer. You choose what to believe. It is the life for you. Perhaps that is the core message the film wanted to convey. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this video, please subscribe and give me a thumbs up.